Some commands don't just defy an alpha, they doom you. Picture this: a temple at the summit of the world, a throne carved from bone that turns liars to stone, and a virgin Omega healer standing before the most brutal Alpha King in history, the man whose legion has conquered 47 packs in 3 years, the giant who leaves nothing but scorched earth and shattered spines. She looks him dead in the eye and says one word: sit. The entire chamber holds its breath. Because that throne, it doesn't just judge, it executes. Any wolf who sits and lies gets petrified instantly, their soul trapped in eternal agony. She's invoking ancient law, demanding he answer for his crimes, certain he'll either refuse or die trying. But Merrick the giant, he smirks. Then he yanks her onto his lap and sinks his fangs into her throat, executing a blood-mating bite that merges their souls in seconds, trapping her in a bond she can't escape. Under ancient law, mates can't testify against each other. He just turned her execution into a permanent prison. Now, here's where it gets twisted. He didn't mate her to avoid judgment. He did it because he recognized her scent as the assassin who poisoned his father. And the throne she commanded him to sit on? It's not a lie detector. It's a vessel for a dead tyrant who needs Aluna's body to return to power. Hey there, my fierce park. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we dive into this absolutely wild story, drop a comment below and let me know, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing our pack grow across continents. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button because trust me, you do not want to miss where this story goes. Now, let's get into it. The blood on Grace's hands was still warm. Not her own, never her own. That was the problem with being a healer. Everyone else's pain became a stain she could scrub away with moon water and prayer, but her own? That clung like a second skin, invisible and suffocating. She stood at the summit of the cloud-reach spire, where the wind screamed through ancient stone archways and the sky pressed down like a predator's jaw. The Temple of the Shattered Moon had stood for 3,000 years, a sanctuary for Omega wolves deemed too weak, too gentle, too sacred to survive in the brutal pack hierarchies below. Grace had tended this temple since she was 16, 7 years of keeping the oral laws, of memorizing every clause and loophole in the decree of the high seat, of pretending she belonged among the soft-voiced priestesses who believed mercy was a virtue instead of a weapon. Today, mercy was a corpse. The Iron Fang Legion had arrived at dawn, a tide of snarling muscle and iron that swallowed the mountain path whole. Their alpha led from the front, because of course he did. Merrick the giant, Merrick the untamed, Merrick the Wolf King, who had conquered 47 packs in 3 years and left behind nothing but scorched earth and broken spines. Grace had watched from the bell tower as his army encircled the temple. She'd counted 300 soldiers, 300 wolves bred for slaughter, their eyes glowing amber even in daylight, their wolves so close to the surface that their human skin looked like a poorly fitting disguise. The priestesses had fled through the catacombs an hour ago, clutching sacred texts and weeping into their silk veils. Grace had sent them away with soft words and softer lies. I'll negotiate. I'll buy you time. I'll be right behind you. She wouldn't be. She had other plans. The throne of whispers sat in the center of the temple's highest chamber, a chair carved from a single piece of bone-white stone, its surface etched with runes that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Legend said it had been hewn from the rib of the first alpha, blessed by the moon herself, and imbued with a singular, terrible purpose. Any wolf who sits upon it and speaks, a lie will be petrified where they sit, their body transformed into stone, their soul trapped forever in silent agony. It was the ultimate judgment seat, the last resort of the desperate. Grace was very, very desperate. She heard him before she saw him, the thud, thud, thud of boots too heavy for a normal man, the scrape of claws against stone, the low rumble of a wolf's growl wrapped in a human throat. When Merrick stepped through the archway, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. He was enormous. Grace had heard the rumors, of course. Giant wasn't poetic license. Merrick stood nearly 7 feet tall, his shoulders broad enough to block out the sun, his frame packed with the kind of muscle that came from a lifetime of violence. His hair was dark as a starless night, pulled back in a rough tie that did nothing to soften the brutal planes of his face. Scars crisscrossed his jaw, his neck, disappearing beneath the black leather of his armor. His eyes were the color of molten gold, and when they locked in onto Grace, she felt the full weight of his wolf, pressing against her consciousness like a physical thing. An alpha's aura was supposed to make Omegas submit, drop to their knees, bare their throats. Grace's knees didn't even tremble. Merrick's nostrils flared. He was scenting her, reading the pheromones that should have screamed Omega. Submissive, harmless. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Confusion? Recognition? Then it was gone, replaced by that signature smirk she'd seen in the intelligence reports. The one that said, "I've already won, and watching you realize it will be the most entertaining part of my day." "Little priestess," he drawled, his voice like gravel scraped over velvet. "Your sisters ran. Smart of them. You, though." He took a step closer, then another. "You smell like fear and defiance and something I can't quite place. Should I be worried?" Grace forced herself to breathe evenly. Her heart was a war drum against her ribs, but she couldn't let him see. Couldn't let him know that standing in the same room with him made every instinct in her body scream, "Run." Instead, she lifted her chin and gestured to the throne of whispers. "You've claimed this temple through bloodshed," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Under the decree of the high seat, I invoke my right as keeper of the laws to demand an accounting. You will sit in that chair and answer for every life you've taken, every pack you've destroyed, every—" "No." The word was flat, final. Grace's jaw tightened. "It's not a request, Alpha. It's ancient law. If you refuse, you forfeit your claim to this territory, and—" "I don't give a fuck about ancient law, Omega." He spat the designation like an insult. "I take what I want. I keep what I can hold. And right now," his gaze dragged over her like a physical touch, lingering on the ceremonial robes that marked her as untouched, unclaimed. "I'm deciding whether you're worth keeping." Rage, bright and vicious, flared in Grace's chest. Good. She needed the rage. It burned away the fear, the doubt, the tiny voice that whispered, "You're going to die here." "Then sit," she commanded, letting her voice crack like a whip through the chamber. "Sit in that throne and prove you're not afraid of the truth." For a heartbeat, silence. Then Merrick threw back his head and laughed, a sound so rich and genuinely amused that it echoed off the stone walls like thunder. "Oh, little Omega," he said, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye, "you have no idea what you just did." And then he moved, not toward the throne, toward her. Grace's body locked up, every muscle screaming danger, but before she could bolt, Merrick's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His grip was iron, hot and unyielding, and he pulled. She stumbled forward, her body colliding with his chest, and suddenly she was drowning in his scent. Smoke and pine, and something darker, something that made her wolf, whimper and press against the inside of her skin. "You want me to sit?" Merrick murmured, his lips so close to her ear that she could feel the heat of his breath. "Fine, I'll sit." He walked backward, dragging her with him, until the backs of his knees hit the edge of the throne of whispers. Then, with a fluid motion that belied his size, he sat and yanked Grace down onto his lap. "No." Grace tried to lurch away, but his arm banded around her waist like a steel trap. "You can't. This isn't ancient law," Merrick interrupted, his voice dropping to a growl that vibrated through her entire body. "States that a mate cannot be compelled to testify against their spouse. It also states that a king cannot be judged while in a state of union." His free hand came up, fingers tangling in her hair, tilting her head to expose the curve of her neck. "So, let's make this legal, shall we?" Grace's blood turned to ice. "Don't you dare!" His fangs sank into her throat. The pain was immediate and exquisite, a white-hot spike that lanced through every nerve ending and detonated in her skull. But worse than the pain was the invasion. She felt Merrick's wolf slam into hers like a battering ram, felt their souls tangle and twist and merge in a way that was never supposed to happen, without consent, without courtship, without love. The mating bond snapped into place with the force of a thunderclap. And Grace, who had spent 7 years hiding what she truly was, felt the monster inside her wake up and scream. The world came back in fragments. Grace's throat burned, her vision swam with black spots. And through it all, she felt him, Merrick's presence inside her head like a second heartbeat, invasive and wrong and so overwhelmingly there that she couldn't tell where her thoughts ended and his began. "What have you done?" she tried to scream, but her voice came out as a broken rasp. Merrick's hand was still tangled in her hair, his fangs withdrawn, but his lips pressed against the wound he'd made. She felt him inhale deeply, tasting her blood, and then his entire body went rigid. "Nightshade," he whispered against her skin. "You smell like nightshade and silver root." Grace's heart stopped. No, he couldn't know. That scent should have faded months ago, buried beneath layers of temple incense and healing herbs. She'd been so careful, so meticulous in scrubbing away every trace of that night. The night she'd crept into the Iron Fang fortress, the night she'd ground the poison into the old king's wine, the night she'd watched Merrick's father choke on his own blood while she whispered prayers she didn't believe. "I don't know what you're—" "Liar." The word was a snarl. Merrick's grip tightened, forcing her to meet his eyes. The gold had bled to pure molten rage. "My father died screaming 6 months ago. Nightshade and silver root. A healer's poison. Untraceable unless you know what to look for." His lips peeled back from his teeth. "Unless you've spent every night since trying to identify the scent of his killer." Grace's mind raced. The bond was new, unstable. He couldn't read her thoughts yet, couldn't sift through her memories, but he could feel her emotions, and right now her terror was probably screaming through the connection like a siren. She forced herself to go still, to breathe, to channel every ounce of training she'd ever received into constructing a mask of confusion. "Your father was a tyrant," she said carefully. "Half the continent wanted him dead. Why would you assume—" "Because you're here." Merrick's thumb traced the bite mark on her throat, sending involuntary shivers down her spine. "Because you stayed when everyone else ran. Because you commanded me to sit in a chair that kills liars, and you didn't flinch." His smile was a razor's edge. "You wanted me dead, little assassin. And now—" He laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "Now you're tied to me for life." The bond pulsed, a sickening wave of shared sensation. Grace felt his anger, his grief, his bone-deep satisfaction at having her caged. But underneath it all was something else, something that felt like pain. He was hurting himself. Grace gasped as phantom agony lanced through her ribs, the same ribs Merrick was now digging his claws into, tearing through his own flesh. Blood welled between his fingers. "Every wound I take," he murmured, watching her face contort, "you'll feel twice as hard. That's how mating bonds work between enemies, Omega. Shared suffering, mutual destruction." His claws dug deeper. "Welcome to your prison." Grace bit back a scream, her vision whiting out. She'd killed his father to stop a war. Now she was bound to the sun, and he planned to make her suffer for it every single day. Merrick's fortress was a monument to violence. The Iron Fang citadel carved into the mountainside like a scar, all black stone and sharp edges that seemed designed to draw blood. Grace was dragged through its gates at dawn, still reeling from the mating bond's brutal installation, still feeling the phantom ache of Merrick's self-inflicted wounds pulsing through her nervous system. The soldiers who'd escorted them down the mountain kept their distance. Smart. She could feel their wolves pressing against the edges of her consciousness, testing, probing, sensing something off about their king's new mate. If only they knew how right their instincts were. Merrick hauled her through corridors lined with weapons and trophies, fangs from defeated alphas, pelts from rival packs, skulls mounted like art. Every surface screamed conquest, domination, power built on the broken backs of anyone foolish enough to challenge him. "Your chambers," he announced, shoving open a door. Grace stumbled inside and froze. The room was beautiful. Silk curtains the color of moonlight, a bed large enough for 6 people, windows overlooking a valley that glittered with morning frost. It looked like a queen's sanctuary. It looked like a cage wrapped in velvet. "You'll stay here," Merrick said from the doorway. "Guarded, fed, kept comfortable." His smile was a predator's promise. "After all, I need you healthy for what comes next." Grace's stomach dropped. What comes next? He stepped closer, and she hated how her body responded. Pulse quickening, skin prickling with awareness. The bond was already trying to rewrite her instincts, trying to make her want him. "War," Merrick said simply. "I have 3 campaigns launching this month. Each one will require my wolves to fight past exhaustion, past injury." His hand caught her chin, tilting her face toward the light. But now I have a healer mate. Your powers will keep my soldiers alive. Your strength will fuel my conquests. I won't. You will. His thumb pressed against her pulse point. Because every time one of my wolves dies, I'll carve a matching wound into my own flesh, and you'll feel it. Every single cut. Horror clawed up Grace's throat. He was going to weaponize the bond, use her healing gifts to enable endless slaughter while ensuring her compliance through shared agony. She should have killed him when she had the chance. There's more, Merrick continued, almost conversational. The pack elders want to meet you, tonight, a formal presentation of the new Luna. His expression darkened. Fair warning, they wanted me to mate with someone from one of the noble bloodlines. Someone useful. A random Omega Temple Keeper isn't exactly what they had in mind. Grace's mind sharpened despite the fear. Palace politics, rival factions, enemies who would see her as a weakness to exploit. Perfect. If she couldn't kill Merrick outright, she'd dismantle his support structure piece by piece, turn his own court against him, find the cracks in his legion and break them. But first, she needed information. These elders, Grace said carefully, they hold real power? Merrick's eyes narrowed. Enough to challenge me if they unified. Why? She met his gaze and lied with a healer's practiced ease. Because if I'm going to survive as your mate, I need to know who wants me dead. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Respect? Intrigue? Then he laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh, little assassin. Everyone wants you dead. Welcome to the Iron Fang. He left, locking the door behind him. Grace waited until his footsteps faded, before pressing her hand against the mating mark on her throat. The bond thrummed beneath her fingers, already starting to drain something from Merrick, though he didn't feel it yet. Good. Let him think he'd caged her. Let him think he'd won. He had no idea what she truly was. The Elder Council chamber reeked of rot disguised as incense. Grace descended the stone steps with 2 guards flanking her, their claws barely sheathed, their wolves pressing against her consciousness like predators testing wounded prey. She'd been dressed in ceremonial Luna robes, midnight blue silk that clung to her frame and exposed the mating mark. Merrick had carved into her throat, a brand, a collar, a declaration of ownership. She hated how it made her skin burn. The council sat in a semicircle around an obsidian table, 7 elders, each ancient enough that their wolves had gone silver behind their eyes. They watched Grace approach with the cold assessment of butchers evaluating meat. Merrick stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Through the bond, Grace felt his anticipation? No, something darker, like he was waiting for a trap to spring. Elders, he said, voice clipped. My mate, Grace of the Shattered Moon Temple. The eldest, a woman with scars covering half her face, leaned forward. No pack name, no bloodline, no warrior training. Her lip curled. You bound yourself to a nobody, King Merrick. I bound myself to leverage, Merrick corrected. She's a healer. Her powers will... We know what she is. Another elder, male, his voice like gravel. The question is whether she's worthy of sitting beside you on the high throne. Grace's instincts screamed danger. The way they said high throne. Not the Iron Fang seat, but something else. Something sacred. There are traditions, the scarred woman continued, her gaze sliding to Grace with predatory interest. Ancient rites that test a Luna's strength. Trials that prove she can channel the power of those who came before. Merrick's hand shot out, slamming against the table. She's already mated. The bond is sealed. Your traditions are irrelevant. Are they? The scarred elder smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. The throne of whispers sits empty in that temple, King Merrick, and according to the old laws, a Luna must sit upon it to receive her inheritance. The temperature in the room dropped. Grace felt Merrick's rage pulse through the sun, hot and vicious, but underneath it was something she hadn't expected. Fear. He was afraid of that throne. Why? My mate will not be subjected to... It's fine, Grace interrupted, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Every eye turned toward her. If sitting in a chair proves my worth, then I'll do it. Merrick's head snapped toward her, gold eyes blazing. Through the bond, she felt his wolf snarl. Don't. You don't understand what they're asking. But Grace held the elders' gazes, reading the hunger there, the barely concealed excitement. They wanted her in that throne, desperately, which meant It was a trap. Good. She'd walked into one trap already today. What was one more? Tomorrow, the scarred elder declared, standing. At moonrise, the Luna will sit upon the throne of whispers and receive her proper place in our hierarchy. She smiled at Merrick. Unless the king believes his mate too weak to survive tradition. Merrick's jaw clenched so hard Grace heard his teeth grind. She'll sit, he bit out, and when she passes your test, you'll remember who rules this pack. The elders filed out, their satisfaction thick in the air. The moment they were gone, Merrick grabbed Grace's arm and hauled her into a shadowed alcove. You just agreed to let them kill you, he snarled. Grace wrenched free. Then why do you care? I'm just your prisoner. You're my mate. The word came out strangled, which means when you die, I feel it. When they destroy you, they destroy part of me. His hand pressed against her mating mark, and Grace gasped at the jolt of sensation. Whatever game you're playing, little assassin, it ends now. But Grace was already planning 3 moves ahead. Merrick didn't let Grace return to her chambers. Instead, he dragged her through a hidden passage behind the throne room, down stairs that spiraled into the mountain's heart, until they reached a vault sealed with iron and blood magic. He pressed his palm against the door, and it opened with a groan that sounded almost alive. Inside was a library, but not the kind Grace had ever seen. The shelves held scrolls so ancient they crumbled at a breath, tablets, carved in languages dead for millennia, and suspended in the center of it all, a single book, bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin. My father's research, Merrick said, pulling the book down with reverent horror. He spent 20 years trying to understand the Throne of Whispers before it killed him, or before someone helped it along. His eyes cut to Grace, sharp with accusation. She said nothing, couldn't deny it. The bond made lying to each other almost physically painful. Merrick flipped through pages, each one covered in frantic handwriting and diagrams that made Grace's head hurt to look at. Then he stopped on an illustration that stole the breath from her lungs. The Throne of Whispers. But in this drawing, it wasn't empty. A figure sat upon it, gender indistinct, features blurred, with roots or veins spreading from the chair into their body, puppet strings made of bone and shadow. It's not a lie detector, Merrick said quietly. It's a vessel, a prison and a portal combined. His finger traced the diagram. 3,000 years ago, there was an alpha named Corvus the Undying. He conquered half the world, enslaved entire packs, bathed in the blood of anyone who defied him. He looked up, and Grace saw genuine fear in those gold eyes. When he finally died, the moon herself intervened. She trapped his soul in that throne, sentenced him to watch the world move on without him, unable to touch, unable to rule. Grace's mouth went dry. But the legends say, the legends are a cover story. Merrick slammed the book shut. The throne doesn't kill liars. It consumes the person who sits on it, overwriting their consciousness with Corvus's spirit. He needs a compatible vessel, someone with enough power to anchor his soul back into the living world. His jaw clenched. A Luna, an Omega, someone already bound to an Alpha through a mating mark. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The elders hadn't wanted to test Grace's worth. They'd wanted to use her, turn her into a puppet for a dead tyrant who would rule through Merrick's mate bond, controlling the king through the woman he was tied to for life. They let you conquer the temple, Grace whispered. They wanted you to mate with whoever sat in that chair. And I gave them exactly what they needed. Merrick's laugh was bitter. I thought I was being clever, using an ancient law to avoid judgment. Instead, I handed them the perfect vessel. He grabbed her shoulders, and the bond flared hot between them. Tomorrow, when you sit, Corvus will take you. Your mind, your memories, everything that makes you you, gone. And I'll be mated to a monster wearing your face. Grace should have felt triumph. This was karma, Merrick suffering for his cruelty, for weaponizing their bond. But instead, she felt his terror bleeding through the connection, and beneath it, something that made her breath catch. Desperation. He didn't want to lose her. Then we run, she said. Break the bond. Flee before. Mating bonds can't be broken except by death. His hand slid to cup her face, surprisingly gentle. And if I die, you die. If you die. His throat worked. The elders made sure we're locked together. The perfect trap. Grace's mind raced. The throne was a vessel. Corvus needed a Luna. But what the elders didn't know, what even Merrick didn't know, was what she truly was. A lunar eclipse wolf. a mutation that stripped alphas of their power through touch. If she sat on that throne, would Corvus try to possess an Omega, or would he try to possess the predator hiding inside her skin? Subscribe now, because Grace's next move will either save them both or doom the entire world. And the truth about what she really is? It's about to come out in the most explosive way possible. Grace woke to agony, not hers, his. Through the bond, she felt Merrick's pain like a forest fire consuming her from the inside out. Ribs cracking, skin splitting, bones grinding, against each other in ways that defied anatomy. She lurched upright in the bed where he'd left her, gasping, clawing at her own chest as phantom wounds opened across her consciousness. He was hurting himself again, punishing himself, punishing her. Grace stumbled from the bed and followed the bond's pull through dark corridors, past sleeping guards, down to the training grounds where Merrick stood alone beneath a blood moon. His shirt was gone. His back was a canvas of fresh cuts, deep, deliberate, carved with his own claws. "Stop!" Grace choked out, falling to her knees as another slash opened across his shoulder blades. Her vision whited out. "Please, stop!" "Why should I?" Merrick didn't turn around. His voice was flat, dead. "Tomorrow you sit in that throne. Tomorrow I lose you to a dead tyrant. Tomorrow I become a puppet king controlled through a mate I can't even save." Another slash. Grace screamed. "At least this way, I get to make you suffer first. You're," Grace gasped, through tears she didn't remember shedding. "You're insane. I'm honest." Now he turned, and the moonlight caught the madness in his eyes. "You killed my father. I'm killing you slowly through our bond. We're perfectly matched, little assassin." He stalked toward her, blood dripping from his fingers. "The only difference is, I'll feel your death tomorrow, and you'll be too busy being possessed to feel mine." Grace's wolf stirred, not the submissive Omega she'd pretended to be, but the other thing, the mutation that had forced her into hiding since puberty, the power that made her too dangerous to exist in any pack hierarchy. Her skin prickled, her fingernails lengthened into claws, and Merrick froze. "What?" His nostrils flared, confusion replacing rage. "Your scent, it's changing." Grace tried to pull the wolf back, but the bond made it impossible. Merrick's pain had cracked her control, and now the truth was bleeding through like poison through gauze. "I'm not an Omega," she whispered. Merrick's eyes went wide. "That's impossible. I can feel You feel what I've trained myself to project for 7 years." Grace's voice cracked. "I'm a lunar eclipse, a mutation. We're born once every 1,000 years, and we're hunted to extinction because of what we can do." "Which is?" Grace met his gaze, and for the first time since the mating, she let him see the monster behind her eyes. "We strip alphas of their wolves, through prolonged contact, through touch." She pressed her hand against the mating mark on her throat. "Through bonds." The color drained from Merrick's face. "You've been touching me for 2 days," he said slowly. "The mating bond is constant contact." "Yes." "How long do I have?" Grace's throat closed. "Weeks, maybe a month. Then your wolf will be gone. You'll be human, powerless." She laughed bitterly. "I was supposed to assassinate you this way, get close, drain you, watch your legion tear itself apart when their king lost his alpha status." Merrick staggered back like she'd shot him. "So, the elders get you," he said, voice hollow, "and I lose everything anyway." He looked at her with something worse than hatred. "We're both already dead." Grace wanted to deny it, wanted to find hope. But as dawn crept over the mountains, painting the world in shades of blood and ash, she couldn't find a single lie that would save them. Grace found Merrick in the vault an hour before moonrise. He sat on the floor surrounded by his father's research, pages scattered like fallen leaves, his eyes bloodshot from reading by candlelight. When he looked up at her, there was no anger left, just exhaustion. "I've been looking for a way out," he said quietly. "Some loophole, some ancient law that could save us." He gestured to the scattered papers. "There's nothing. Once Corvus takes you, the only way to stop him is to destroy the throne, which requires killing the vessel." His voice cracked. "Which means killing you." Grace sat across from him, close enough that their knees almost touched. The bond hummed between them, weakened now, she could feel it. Merrick's wolf was already fading, growing distant like a voice calling from underwater. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for your father, for lying, for all of it." He deserved to die. Merrick's admission shocked them both. He was a monster. Worse than me, maybe. He looked at his hands, still stained with blood from last night's self-mutilation. I became what I am because I watched him rule through fear. I thought that was strength. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it was just trauma. Grace's chest tightened. Through the bond, she felt his grief, not for his father, but for the boy he'd been before violence became his language. The elders knew, she said suddenly. They knew your father was researching the throne. They probably helped him, fed him information, encouraged his obsession. Her mind raced. What if they wanted him dead too? What if they'd been planning this for decades? Merrick's eyes sharpened. They kill my father, knowing I'd seek revenge. They let me conquer the temple, knowing I'd encounter the throne. They manipulate me into mating with whoever could serve as Corvus's vessel. He stood abruptly. This wasn't opportunistic. It was orchestrated. But why? Grace stood too, pacing. What do they gain from resurrecting a dead tyrant? Control. Merrick pulled out another scroll, this one marked with the Elder's seal. Corvus was known for ruling through council, sharing power with those who served him. My father ruled alone. I rule alone. His jaw clenched. They don't want a king. They want a puppet they can manipulate. Grace's breath caught. Then we don't give them one. Grace, you'll be possessed in less than an hour. What if I'm not? She grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. What if being a lunar eclipse means Corvus can't possess me? What if my mutation makes me incompatible as a vessel? Merrick's expression shifted from despair to desperate hope. That's a hell of a gamble. So is sitting here waiting to die. Grace's fingers pressed against his chest, feeling his weakened wolf pulse beneath. I've been draining you for 2 days, and you're still standing, still fighting. Maybe the bond is slowing the process. Maybe, she swallowed hard, maybe we're stronger together than apart. Merrick's hand covered hers, and the bond flared. Not with pain this time, but with something that felt dangerously like understanding. If you sit on that throne and Corvus can't take you, he said slowly, the elders will kill you themselves. Then you'll have to protect me. Grace met his eyes. Can you do that? Defend the woman who murdered your father? Merrick was quiet for a long moment. Then he pressed his forehead against hers, and through the bond, Grace felt his wolf, damaged, fading, but still there, wrap around her consciousness like a shield. Try to stop me, he whispered. The temple chamber was packed. Every elder, every high-ranking wolf in the Iron Fang Legion. Guards lined the walls, their hands on their weapons, their eyes glowing with anticipation. The throne of whispers sat in the center like an altar of bone, its runes pulsing with sickly light. Grace walked toward it with Merrick at her side, their hands clasped. Through the bond, weakened but still present, she felt his wolf coiling like a spring, ready to strike. The scarred elder stepped forward, smiling. Luna Grace, are you prepared to receive your inheritance? Grace's jaw set. I am. She released Merrick's hand and sat. The world exploded. Pain, white-hot and consuming, lanced through every nerve ending as the throne's magic activated. Grace felt something ancient and furious slam into her consciousness, trying to tear her mind apart and wear her skin like a coat. Mine! A voice roared inside her skull. This body is mine. Submit! Yield! Break! But Grace's lunar eclipse wolf rose to meet him. She was a void, a black hole, a creature designed to consume power, not surrender to it. Corvus's spirit screamed as her mutation latched onto his essence and began to drain him like venom from a wound. The throne beneath her cracked, hairline fractures spreading across its surface as two incompatible forces collided. What's happening? The scarred elder's smile vanished. She should be consumed by now. Grace's eyes snapped open, pure silver, no whites, no pupils. When she spoke, her voice echoed with two tones, hers and something older, hungrier. Your vessel is defective, she snarled, and your tyrant is starving. Merrick moved before the elders could react. His claws extended, and he lunged at the scarred woman with the precision of a king who'd spent his life in combat. She dodged, but barely. Merrick's wolf might be fading, but his skill was still lethal. The chamber erupted into chaos. Half the guards turned on the elders, loyal to Merrick. The other half attacked their king, revealing themselves as conspirators. Blood splattered across ancient stone as wolf fought wolf, claws tearing through flesh, fangs finding throats. Grace remained on the throne, locked in internal war with Corvus's spirit. She could feel him unraveling, his consciousness fragmenting as her mutation stripped away his power piece by piece. But he was fighting back, trying to possess her through sheer force of will, trying to break her mind before she could destroy him. "You cannot win," Corvus hissed. "I am eternal. I am." "You're already dead," Grace snarled back. "And I'm very good at finishing what others start." She pulled harder, and Corvus shattered. His spirit dissolved into nothing, his essence absorbed into Grace's wolf, his 3,000-year reign ending not with glory, but with a whimper. The throne beneath her crumbled to dust. Grace collapsed forward, gasping, her body smoking as excess power burned through her veins. Through blurred vision, she saw Merrick rip out the scarred elder's throat, saw the last conspirator fall, saw the loyal guards standing over the bodies of those who'd tried to resurrect a dead god. Then Merrick was there, catching her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her like a fortress. "You did it," he breathed against her hair. "You destroyed him." Grace laughed weakly. "Destroyed him. Destroyed the throne. Probably destroyed half your political structure." She looked up at him. "Your wolf. I can barely feel it anymore." Merrick's smile was sad but genuine. "Then I guess you'll have to protect me now." 3 weeks later, Grace stood on the balcony of the Iron Fang Citadel and watched the sun rise over mountains that no longer felt like a prison. Behind her, Merrick slept, truly slept, without nightmares of his father or the weight of endless conquest pressing against his skull. His wolf was gone now, completely. Grace had drained the last of it 5 days ago, and instead of rage or grief, he'd simply exhaled and said, finally. She'd expected him to hate her for it. Instead, he'd pulled her close and whispered, "Thank you for setting me free." Turns out, being a monster was exhausting. Being human was a relief. The door opened, and Merrick emerged, shirtless, the mating mark on his throat still visible, but no longer pulsing with bond magic. Without his wolf, the supernatural connection had dissolved, leaving only the emotional foundation they'd built through blood and honesty. "You're up early," he murmured, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Grace leaned into him. Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about. The pack had fractured after the Elder conspiracy was revealed. Half the soldiers had left, unwilling to follow a human king. The other half stayed, not out of fear, but out of something that looked suspiciously like respect. Merrick had spent the last 3 weeks dismantling his father's war machine, returning conquered territories, offering reparations to packs he'd destroyed. It was slow, painful work, rebuilding a legacy made of violence into something that might resemble peace. "The Northern Pack sent their response," Merrick said quietly. "They're willing to negotiate treaties, real ones, not the kind enforced through threats." Grace turned in his arms. "And the Southern Territories?" Also interested. His smile was tentative, unfamiliar, on a face built for scowls. Apparently, a human king with a lunar eclipse mate is too intriguing to ignore. They want to see if we'll survive the year. Grace traced the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the father who had broken him, the legacy he was trying to rewrite. "We killed a 3,000-year-old tyrant and survived an Elder conspiracy. I think we can handle a few treaties." Merrick caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I never apologized. For the mating bite, for using the bond to hurt you, for don't." Grace pressed her fingers against his lips. "We were both trying to destroy each other. The difference is we failed spectacularly and ended up saving each other instead." His laugh was soft, genuine. Worst assassination attempt in history. Worst political hostage situation ever. They stood there as dawn painted the world gold. Two people who'd tried to be monsters and discovered they were just broken instead. Healing was slow, trust was fragile, but Grace had spent 7 years pretending to be something she wasn't, and Merrick had spent a lifetime wearing violence like armor. Maybe it was time to try something different. Maybe it was time to try being real. "I love you," Merrick said suddenly, the words rough and unpracticed. "I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you sat on that throne knowing it could kill you. Maybe when you looked at me, without my wolf, and didn't flinch. But I do love you." Grace's throat tightened. "I love you too, even though you're absolutely terrible at expressing emotions. I'll work on it. You better." She kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting like second chances and new beginnings. Below them, the Iron Fang Citadel stirred to life, soldiers training, treaties being drafted, a kingdom learning to exist without conquest. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was theirs. Thank you so much for watching this journey. If you loved Grace and Merrick's story, smash that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what story you want to see next. Should I do more enemies to lovers? Forbidden bonds? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one. And hey, click that video on your screen right now because the next story is already waiting for you. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happens when a rejected Omega discovers she's actually the last descendant of the moon goddess herself.